The anima is the archetype of life, and it is, when the anima is negative, it is the impulse to dream about life and to make wishful fantasies about life instead of living life. And that's why vampires and Draculas and the creatures alike always suck one's blood. The blood is the emotional, active psyche in us, the affect psyche. And such people have no activity left, or no life activity left. They just sink into a passive, wishful dream. The dream tries to tell him it's a ghost which is haunting me, because actually he's haunted not by reality, he's haunted by a fantasy, which is draining his whole psychic energy.
At the end of the dream, the man's unable to escape from the vampire. It's going to suck the blood out of him. How would you interpret that?
That is really the characteristic of most negative or split-off complexes. If we reject or split off some complex of our psyche, then it begins to sap our energy secretly, behind our back, so to speak. And then it turns slowly into what is aptly represented by the image of a vampire, something which attacks us in the night and sucks all our blood. People feel they don't know, they come into analysis and they say, I feel listless, I just feel tired, I just don't want to do anything, I wake up already in the morning depressed, nothing means anything to me anymore. We could answer to them, you are probably sucked by a vampire, you are bloodless, you have no life impulse, no pleasure in life anymore, no interest or anything. And then you generally find that this vampire is just a split-off complex which has been split off so radically and so powerfully that it can only sap energy anymore. It cannot manifest in any other way anymore.
Why are the movies about death goddesses and vampires so popular?
I think all movies which touch essential psychological facts, the movies nowadays more or less replace the fairy tale telling and the myth telling. It's our modern form of myth and fairy tales, and therefore movies which tell about the inner world like fairy tales do are much more attractive to the public, because we really need myths to have an orientation or to have mapping out the dream world or the unconscious. And in past time there were the innumerable myths of vampires which fascinated people. Tales retold all over the world. In China, for instance, you have a whole host of ghost stories where a man meets a fox, and then the fox is really the ghost of a dead and turns up as a beautifully made-up girl, and he has a marvelous life with her till one day he discovered that she's an evil demon, she's a skeleton. And then sometimes it ends bad, she pulls him into death, or he can, with the help of priests and magicians, free himself from the demon. And we, for instance, in the Swiss Alps, we have stories that our cowherds high up in the mountain who have to live there the whole summer alone without having women. Every night the Dockeli comes, that is a female ghost, comes through the door invisibly and rides them all the night. And they have sexual pollutions, and in the morning they wake up completely exhausted and can't practically move anymore, overwhelmed, so to speak, by sexual fantasies and by the unlived life.
If the man's feelings are locked in to the mother complex, if his life is being sucked away by the vampire, then how can he transform those feelings? How can he get free of the mother complex?
I once met the dream of a young man who was living still with Mama. He was 29 and had never had a girl in his room. And so we seriously discussed the possibility of getting a room outside his mother's home. and he was terrified. He was a very sensitive, delicate boy, and his mother was a very brutal, strong personality, and he was just terrified of the moment to tell mother, look here, I am going to take a room outside and I'm not going to live with you anymore. And when he was kind of trying to make up his mind, he dreamt that he had to slay the dragon. So that, in that case, it means actually that though it seems such a, to us, little thing to tell mother, I have to room, for him that was slaying the dragon. It was overcoming a monstrous neurotic difficulty within himself. His whole mother complex, not only facing the scene of his actual mother, but overcoming also the inertia and the anxiousness of his own mother complex. His mother had sowed in him an anxiousness, a fear of life. He had to overcome a terrific fear of life to make that step. And that is an archetypal motif all over the place, that the young man has to do the heroic deed of killing his mother, or the mother dragon, or the mother demon, which is what is anxious or lazy or afraid of living a masculine life.
And where do you see the anima manifest in life?
On a primitive level, it appears in men generally as an element of romantic, unreal, mostly sexual fantasies. And you see, for instance, in puberty, when young men are very active and then suddenly they become passive and dreamy and they are not there, and their performance in school goes down tremendously, and one has the feeling, where is that? Where has that young man disappeared? He's in the clutches up to the neck of daydreaming sexual fantasies. In that age it is a normal transition, but if a man gets stuck in indulging in wishful sexual fantasies, he literally falls into the hand of a vampire. He loses his capacity of taking his own life in hand, he loses his willpower, he loses all his male efficiency, and he just daydreams all the time about women and their curves and would-be romantic adventures and so on. He lives in an unreal life. I saw once a man who was 43, still living with his mother, who had never approached a woman. I asked him, what on earth are you doing with your sex? And he gave a secretive smile and didn't confess. He just masturbated widely every night. And then he dreamt that he was in daytime living an ordinary life, but in the nighttime he was living on a luscious island where he had wild sexual adventures with women. That was the fantasy world into which he had disappeared. In a primitive tribe, one would say such a man has been bewitched. He's bewitched.
We would say he's locked into an infantile attitude to life. He's being devoured by the mother.
These black garments represent a typical feature of an undeveloped inner anima figure. That would mean that his whole capacity of love is mostly autoerotic. When a man has not developed his anima, his feminine side is generally very narcissistic. That's what women painfully feel, that when a man in love is meowing under her window like a tomcat in love, he really loves his own fantasy. He loves his own being in love. But there's a long way for him to learn to love her and not enjoying his own being in love. And if you read in literature a young man, when he generally discovers the experience of love, it's mostly a completely autoerotic fantasy, out of which he has, through a painful development, learned to love the woman not as the object of his romantic fantasies, but as a human partner.
What does this inner transformation mean in terms of the man's relationship to an actual woman in outer life?
The peeling of the black anima and her transformation in a white golden anima is the transformation of the loving capacities of a man, of a transformation of his eros from a primitive autoerotic fantasy into a true human capacity for love. As soon as this transformation takes place, he then is attacked by primitives who want to keep the woman, that she should remain black and stay with the blacks in a black village. So there is a strong primitive tendency to relapse again into the old attitude, but the dreamer can successfully fight it off.